anything." He abandoned his desk and established the necessary connections between the visiray apparatus and the controls of his board. There was a fierce violet-white glare from the plate as he closed the switch, and he leaped back with his hands over his eyes, temporarily blinded. "Wow, that's hot stuff," he exclaimed. "It works, all X, to the Queen's taste," as he donned his heavy ray goggles and resumed his place. After making certain that the visiray was precisely synchronized and phased with the searching frequency, he built up the power of that beam until it was using 20,000 kilofrancs. Then, by delicately manipulating the variable condensers and inductances of his sensitive shunting relay circuits, he slowly shifted that frightful rod of energy from frequency to frequency, staring into the brilliant blankness of his micrometer screen as he did so. After a few minutes of search, the screen darkened somewhat, revealing the image of the Jovian globe. Brandon instantly shifted into that one channel the entire power of his attack, steadying the controls to bring the sphere of the Jovians into the sharpest possible focus, knowing that he had found the open slit and that through it there was pouring upon the enemy the full power of his terrible weapon. In the fraction of a second before the Jovians could detect the attack and close the slit, he saw a portion of the wall of their vessel flare into white heat and literally explode outward in puffs and gouts of flaming molten metal and of incandescent gases. But the thrust, savage as it was, had not been fatal, and the enemy countered instantly. Now that the crushing force of the full coverage attack was lessened for a moment, through another slit there poured a beam of energy equal to the terrestrial's own, a beam of such intense power that the outer screen of the Sirius flared from red through the spectrum, to and beyond the violet, and went black in less than a second, and the inner screen had almost gone down before Brandon's lightning hands could restore the complete coverage that so effectively blanketed the forces of the enemy. "Well, we're back to the status quo," announced Brandon calmly. "It's a good gag they didn't have time to locate our working slit. If they had pushed that stuff through our open channel, we'd have gotten frizzled up some around the edges. As it was, we got the edge on that exchange. Take it from your Uncle Dudley, Quince. That bird knows that he's been nudged." Again he searched the entire band for an opening, but could find none. The enemy had apparently retired into a tightly closed shell of energy. The small vessel no longer struggled, nor even moved, but was merely resisting passively. Not an open channel, not even one for him to work through. He can't wiggle. Well, that won't get him anything. We're so much bigger than he is that we can outlast him, and we'll get him sometime, since he's bound to run out of power before we do. I don't believe he can receive anything, sealed up as he is, and he can't have accumulators even more efficient than ours to make up the difference, can he, Quince?" "It is quite possible. For instance, although we have never heard of any progress being made along such lines, it has been pointed out repeatedly that synthesis of a radioactive element of very high atomic weight would theoretically yield an almost perfect accumulator, one many thousands of times as efficient as ours in mass-to-energy ratio. Then, too, you realize, of course, that there is a bare possibility that intra-atomic energy may not be absolutely impossible." "Nix on that, Quince. I'll stand for a lot, but not for that last idea. It's hard to say that anything's impossible, of course, except things made so by definition, or by being contrary to observational facts. But the best work shows that intra-atomic energy is just about as impossible as anything can be. It has been shown pretty conclusively that all ordinary matter is already in its most stable state, so that work must be done upon any ordinary atom to decompose it. Besides, if he had either radioactive accumulators or intra-atomic energy, he would have cut us up long ago. Nope, the answer is that he's probably yelled for help and is trying to hold out until it gets here," was Brandon's rejoinder. "What can we do about it?" asked Quince. "Don't know yet. I do know, though, that we aren't half as ready for trouble as I thought we were. There's a dozen things I want to do that I can't because we haven't got the stuff. Don't say I told you so either. I know you did. You're the champion ground and lofty thinker of the century. Alcantro. Here? Round up the gang, will you, and figure me out a screen and a set of meters that will indicate an open band. We lose too much time feeling around anyhow, and we're too apt to take one on the chin while we're doing it. Also, you ought to make it so it'll shoot a jolt into the opening, while you're at it," said Brandon. "We shall begin at once," and the massive Martian, as he replied, stepped over to the calculating machine. "Well, Quince, we can't do much to him this way. He's crawled into a hole and pulled the hole in after him. Gosh, I wish we had more stuff." After all, we have everything whose necessity and practicability could have been foreseen in the light of our information. We can, of course, go further. You chirped it. But we can't let things ride this way, or we'll get our hair singed. We'll have to decorate him with the Grand Slam, I guess. Yes, it seems as though the time for emergency measures has arrived. Put everything on the center of the band? That is probably the best frequency to use in a case of this kind. He can't control, so we'll push him down close to the ground before we go to work on him, so we don't have so far to fall if anything goes screwy with the works. Here's hoping nothing gives away. The Sirius, almost against the flaming screens of the Jovian, and both vessels very close to the surface of the satellite, Brandon tested the power leads briefly, adjusted dials and coils, then touched the button which actuated the relays which in turn drove home the gigantic switches that launched a fearsome and as yet untried weapon. Instantly released, the full 700,000 kilofrancs of their stupendous batteries of accumulators drove into the middle frequency of the attacking band, and Brandon's heart was in his mouth as he stared into the plate to see what would happen. He saw. Everything in the Sirius held fast, and under the impact of the inconceivable plane of force, the screens of the enemy vessel flared instantly into an even more intense incandescence, and in that same fleeting instant went down, and all defenses vanished as the metal sphere fell apart into two halves, as would an apple under the full blow of a broadaxe. Brandon quickly shut off his power and stared in relief into the central compartment of the globular ship of space, now laid open, and saw there figures, one or two of which were moving weakly. As he looked, one of these feebly attempted to raise a peculiar tubular something toward a helplessly fettered body. Even as Brandon snatched away the threatening weapon with a beam of force, he recognized the captive. "Great cut! There's Breckenridge!" he gasped, and directed a lifting beam upon the bound and unconscious prisoner. Rapidly, but carefully, he was brought through the double airlock and into the control room, where his shackles were cut away and where he soon revived under vigorous and skillful treatment. "Any more of you in there? Did I hit any of you with that beam?" demanded Brandon intensely as soon as Breckenridge showed signs of understanding. "King's in there somewhere, and there's a Calistonian human being that you mustn't kill," the chief pilot replied, weakly and with great effort in every word. "Don't believe that you hit anybody direct, but the shock was pretty bad." Having delivered his message, he lay back, exhausted. "All X. Crown, give me a squad." "Not on your life," barked the general. "This is my job, and I'll do it myself. Your job is fighting the Sirius. Stay with it." "Not in 7,000 years. I'm in on this too," Brandon protested, but was decisively overruled by Newton. "You belong right here at this board, since no one else can handle it the way you can. Stay here," he commanded. "All right," grudgingly assented the physicist, and held the Sirius upright, with her needle-sharp stern buried a few feet deep in the ground. He watched the wreckage jealously while Crown and Shield and 40 helmeted men issued from the service door in the lower ultralight compartment and advanced upon the two halves of the enemy vessel. As no hostile demonstrations ensued, scaling ladders were quickly placed, and with weapons at the alert the police boarded the hemispheres, manacled the still helpless beings visible, and after laying